You're listening to Indiana Jones and the Comics Crusade on the LONGBOX CRUSADE NETWORK. Hello and welcome to Indiana Jones and the Comics Crusade. I'm your host, Jared Albrecht, the Yard Sale Artist, and I will be taking you on an adventure with me as I index all 34 issues of 1983's The Further Adventures of Indiana Jones by Marvel Comics. On this episode, we will be taking a look at issue number 7. Issue 7 was cover dated July 1983 with a script by David Michelinie, penciler is Kerry Gamble, inks by Sam De La Rosa, letterer is Joe Rosen, colorist is Bob Sharon, and editor is Louise Jones. Here's your cover description. This cover is drawn by Ron Frenz and inked by Daniel Bulanati. The Marvel Comics Group banner is yellow with black letters, and Indiana Jones stands pistol ready in his yellow corner box. The title logo is red with white highlights, and the main action depicts Indiana Jones dangling from a jungle canopy while trying to hold Marion from the fate of the snapping alligators below. To make matters worse, a large snake is also moving in unnoticed on Indy, which adds a touch of humor as Indy states, "It could be worse, Marion. It could be snakes." And now for a quick story synopsis. After going up against longtime archaeological foe Ian MacIver and his army of monks in France, Indiana Jones returns home to present his treasure to Marcus Brody. Marcus is quickly enthralled by the paper in which Indiana wrapped the artifact, realizing it's a map of a long-forgotten, possibly Atlantean race of people. The map seems to indicate that the descendants of Atlantis settled in the Congo area of Africa. And after Marion blackmails her way into Dr. Jones's expedition, the two quickly find themselves fighting off all manner of jungle creatures, only to get trapped in quicksand. Luckily, Dutch expedition leader Kurt Vogel rescues the duo, but unluckily it turns out that he's not Dutch. He's a Nazi colonel looking for the same tribe as Indy. Oh, and Ian MacIver, he's assisting the Nazis with their hunt. Okay, folks, we are back down here in the Temple of Longbox, and we've got our Further Adventures of Indiana Jones number 7, and we've got our special guest with us for this episode. It is my friend from the Real American Headcast, amongst many other podcasts that Aaron Head Moss does over at Head Speaks. Welcome to the Temple of Longbox, Aaron.
Hey, Jared. Thanks for inviting me in. I know probably somebody else canceled in the last. Let's get Brother Heading. He'll do it.
Actually, you're going to be sharing this episode. We're bringing in the writer of this book, David Michelinie's here.
That's what I thought. Maybe David canceled the last minute. Who's going to bring in? Can't get the writer in here, so let's bring someone else.
No, man. I remember when I was sort of telling you guys that we podcast together, like I said, over on your G.I. Joe show especially. Right. And I was telling some of the guys over there that I was doing this project, and a lot of you expressed interest and said, "Oh, I love that comic." So you'll be in on an episode. I'm sure our friends Kevin will be here. Probably Brad will be here at some point. But yeah, you get to be the first one from that crew. So
very nice.
Here we are with the Further Adventures of Indiana Jones number 7. And we're going to start where everybody starts with a comic book. We are going to look at the cover. You guys already heard me describe it before I brought Aaron in. So we can just jump right to Aaron's thoughts on the cover of issue 7. What do you think, man?
I couldn't find this one, so I just ended up watching the Crystal Skull. And
okay, we'll talk about that then.
I'll talk about that one for half an hour. And everyone loves the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
That's good stuff.
I actually, as we talked over my G.I. Joe show, I actually enjoyed those last 2 Indiana Jones films, as I say down below. But no, we're here to talk about the Further Adventures of Indiana Jones. I like this cover. It's very reminiscent of Indiana Jones, the movies I've seen, especially the early ones. And yeah, they got snakes, alligators. They got a scene basically from the book, which we've talked about over on my G.I. Joe show. Sometimes they have a cover that's whatever they've got handy, and then sometimes they've got actually something depicting an actual scene. And as I said over there, I love whenever a cover depicts something you're going to see in the book. So I do love this cover. We get Indiana Jones holding Marion above the gators, and again featuring the hero from Raiders of the Lost Ark. So
yeah, that cover blurb is great, isn't it?
very nice. Yes, yes. Especially as I was when the Raiders come out, 82, I want to say. So I was like 12,
right.
12 or 13 when it came out. So I was right in the sweet spot. And yeah, I played the Raiders video game on Atari.
Ooh.
Lost Ark. I love that game. Spent many, many hours playing that stupid game. But so yeah, no, it's a great cover. Yeah, very, very Indiana Jones.
Oh, absolutely agree with you on this, by the way. This is issue 7, and man, this might be the most Indiana Jones-ish cover that we've had. I mean, it just exudes. It's the jungle, like you said. It's Crocs, and it's Marion, and there's a snake coming in. And Indiana himself is, like I mentioned I'm sure I mentioned in the cover description, he's got the word bubble. It could be worse, Marion. It could be snakes. Just reinforcing the one thing we know about the character, that he hates snakes, right?
Yes.
I like to, I mention this on every episode, but to remind the guests too, that, when this comic came out, there was only one movie. There was just one Indiana Jones film to go from, which ends up being interesting because in almost every issue of Further Adventures of Indiana Jones, I find something that I feel like it's used in sequential movies that have not come out yet. So I wonder what we'll find in here. But yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you. This is a really just screams Indiana Jones cover. Like if you were a kid who halfway was interested in Indiana Jones, you saw this on the spinner, you'd be like, yeah. Well, let's open it up and get into the story. And, on our long box shows, we usually have a bunch of people and we all go through a variety of highs and lows and what does. Well, you get to be the star, Aaron. You get to tell us what some of your highs or lows or what does. And, you could be like Pat. You can have pretty much as many as you want. And I may throw in with questions or comments, but really the floor is kind of yours. So what'd you think of the story, Africa Screams Chapter 1?
I love the cold opening we get of where I start in the middle of a story where Indiana Jones is, he's in the middle of a mission confronting, what's that guy's name? MacGyver?
MacGyver, no duct tape, but right. But he is MacGyver. Yes.
Not MacGyver, but MacGyver.
Not MacGyver, but I can't say it right.
I have a problem speaking myself, as you well know. So I do like
podcasters.
Yeah. It's funny that I don't like talking, but I got podcasts doing half a dozen different shows. Who knows? Anyways, but I do love that. Yeah, we're starting in the middle of a story, middle of a mission. And I like that this is the first issue of this. I'm not coming into the middle of one of your storylines. This is the starting with a new storyline, but we're starting at the middle of a storyline. So I do, I do like that. It shows that Indiana Jones isn't sitting on his thumbs, in between issues. He's actually out doing things, and we're catching up sometimes in the middle of a story. So that's one of the big likes I have on this is, the fact that we're starting out in the middle of a mission. And, I could see if I was watching this as a movie or TV show after he makes the getaway and MacGyver's like, we'll meet again, Indiana Jones. And they play the title credits at that point.
Yeah, it's like a James Bond movie with the credits comes in.
Yes,
and
yes, I could definitely see that appearing there. And you get a little foreshadowing. Yeah, he's like, we will meet again, Indiana Jones. Like, oh, really? I wonder if I have to. Oh, okay. Here he is, right near the end of this issue. Okay.
It's interesting you bring up sort of the storytelling jumping off point, because I've read through all these once, and now as I'm going through them the second time to do the podcast series, I think you got a really key issue, if I'm not mistaken. I'm prepared to be wrong because we got plenty more to go, but I feel like 7 here, as written by David Michelini, is the one that's going to launch more of the overarching story. Like we've had a lot of vignettes
right
up until now. Like 6 was the first time they even brought Marion back into it. And then 7, I feel like, if my memory serves, could be wrong, but I feel like David spends a good tenure on this book and starts to get along. And I know MacGyver is going to be a recurring character in his storylines. And I feel like up to this point, 1 through 6, like I said, sort of vignettes, like good, solid Indiana Jones stories. But I feel like 7 is where we're going to start getting some real continuity in these stories. So
I've only read a couple of these issues over the years here and there. I never really got into this series. I didn't see it on the newsstand because I didn't really start buying comics until 87 with G.I. Joe, as we've talked about.
Right. So this would have been gone by then. Marvel did the adaptation of Last Crusade. That was like 89, but aside from that, the further adventures I think had long faded by then.
So Mike McIver, is this the first time he shows up, or is he showing up earlier in the book?
This is his first appearance, but I know I'm very confident he's going to be back again if my memory serves correct.
Okay, I was curious about if he showed up before or if this was his actual first appearance. And that's another thing I like, that, they brought him in, and from the way they introduce him, he seems like a longtime villain or foe of Indiana Jones. So having come into this, the first issue I've actually sat down and read, and I don't know how long maybe, it's like, well, it seems like he's got a long history with this guy, and he's the first appearance. It's very nice. Micheline did a great job introducing this villain, if you will.
Yeah, it's very similar to how Belloc gets introduced in Raiders. Like they have sort of established these guys know each other. They're a bit of competitors. One of them's a little slimier than the other one,
Yeah. On I think it was an Instagram post I saw the other day, someone was talking about how they like a lot of these older shows like Star Wars and things. They start out with a cold open. They start out with the world already existing, and they don't go back and explain things, how it got to that point. And then they later on, for instance, Star Wars, they go back and explain a lot of this backstory, which a lot of people don't care for. And I do like the fact that there is, this continuing story that goes on before where we jump in at. So it makes the world more believable and more livable.
Yeah, Dave did a good job creating that. So what else you got, man? You've really covered a lot of the intro and MacGyver and Indiana Jones fighting a bunch of monks, which you don't see coming. They end up being undercover monks more than anything. But then we kind of get into the story proper, where again it feels like a real solid Indiana Jones movie because he gets up with Marcus, and fine. And what did you think of that moving forward?
I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I don't care much for Marion in here. It's not that I don't like her. She doesn't seem very Marion-like to me. Can't quite put my finger on it. But the way she's written, and again, I don't want to take anything from David Micheline. He's a great writer. I've read a lot of his other work. Something about the way she's written.
She's very manipulative.
Yeah. She's very manipulative, and she just doesn't, I don't know. She's a little more verbose. I mean, Mary in the movie, she was a very intelligent woman, but here, and maybe it's just because it's for the printed page. It's a comic, but she seems to talk a little bit more than she needs to. And I don't just something about her dialogue. And I said, if I have to have a dislike or something bad about the issue, I guess that would be my dislike for the issue. Is just the way that Marion's written doesn't come across as the same character I watched in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
I'm going to agree with you there, because whether she's in Raiders or even King of the Crystal Skull, like you said, she's got a hard edge, but she's always likable. And I feel like she was a little not so likable because she was blackmailing her way into this adventure, basically. And
she did a lot. I don't know if she necessarily did that in Raiders, but I mean, she kind of forced her way in. And I don't know, maybe it's because I'm 54 years old looking back, where Raiders, I was like 12 when it came out. And maybe it's I'm older, but I just don't, I don't like the way she's doing it here. It just comes, like you said, manipulative. It comes across as more so than she did originally. I don't know.
I wonder if we're seeing the value of a Karen Allen performance. Like, I wonder if she could do all this dialogue and still come off as likable and charming, because Karen Allen is great. And and I do feel like I'm shifting gears a little bit here, but I like what the artist did in here, and you can weigh in on that as well. Because as we've talked about in all the episodes leading up to this, we're fairly certain that Marvel got the rights to the characters, but not to the likenesses of the actors or actresses. So they're always kind of close-ish in the book. But I really like how the artist captured what he did with her. Like, she's very cute, and she's got the little freckly, and it's not a likeness of Karen Allen, but I think they really captured her essence there.
Yeah, I see more of an essence of Harrison Ford in Indy. It's very much, I can see that being Harrison Ford. I can see what you're talking about with Marion. I don't quite see the actress in there, but I do see what you're saying. As
far as likenesses go, I think they got really close, I thought, to Denholm Elliott as Marcus.
Yes.
I think that looks a lot like him.
And that's what I've heard. I don't know, maybe it was you that's telling us over on the G.I. Joe show or somewhere. I was talking to somebody, and they had mentioned how, a lot of times they don't get maybe they can use the character's likeness like in the book, but on the cover they can't use the likeness.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's a lot of it's a licensing issue, and why you don't get these characters that look like the characters you're actually used to seeing on the screen. So
yeah, it's especially interesting in like the Star Wars books and the Indiana Jones books because you do get the likenesses when they do the adaptations. You can tell they have all the rights for adaptations, but then when they, the Star Wars ongoing and the Indiana Jones ongoing, things get a little looser. But I think this artist, which as a reminder to everybody is Carrie Gamble, does a fine job.
Another great artist. Yeah. Carrie Gamble, and love his work. But yeah, I do like it. Skipping back just a little bit there on these pages aren't numbered, so I hate that. But when we start the story proper, we do show the plane going on the map from one to the, just like we see in the movie. We see the plane crossing the map. I love that. That's another definite plus on this.
Definitely. So then we pretty much move on from Marion blackmailing her way in to them. I think they went to the Congo. Is that right?
Somewhere like that.
It's not like it was in Africa and
the Sankura River.
There you go.
I had to look at and see.
And I was just about to say, especially that art when he's like push rafting them down said river with the light. Anyway, you talk.
Oh no, that's the page I'm looking at right now. And I love the way the light is streaming through the trees and just hitting this water in spots, and we can see that it's a dark, dense jungle. Just a few lights coming through making it through the canopy. It's fantastic. I love this one panel here on top of page whatever. I do,
it's great.
I do love the way that's drawn. It's very nice.
Yeah, then you move into more of the Indiana Jones fights the wildlife because they upset some hippos and then some crocodiles. And guess what, Aaron? It's the 80s, so where do they end up?
And I think we've talked about it over on the G.I. Joe show. Reading comics and movies and things from the 80s, I expected to run a lot more quicksand than I have.
Quicksand!
I have yet to run any quicksand, but yeah, this was a thing in movies, TV shows, comics, everything from the 80s. Quicksand was around every corner.
I couldn't have been happier when I saw Indiana Jones go from like hippos to crocs to snakes to quicksand. I was like, yes, this is 80s all over, man.
Very much right at the beginning of the 80s where this was all very, very nice. I do, and again, it's Indiana Jones. So they had to, why he didn't say it, but he's like, it's snakes. Well, great.
Here we are again. Yeah.
Might have to be snakes.
So then they link up with Dr. Kurt Vogel, I think was his name.
Vogel.
Yeah. And he's a Dutch pharmacist. Heavy air quote. Did that fool you at all?
I knew there was something like Indy was saying it's too convenient that they're there. They're this heavily armed for a pharmaceutical company. They're saying I wasn't quite sure that he was a Nazi, but I knew there was more to the story than he was telling us.
Spoiler: he's a Nazi because we all it's Indiana Jones comic. We all knew it was going to be a Nazi.
Well, especially when the guards take out the alligator, they blow it full of holes, and he's like, idiots. Use Ken Swat insect. That's very looking back at it. Mm-hmm. That's very, I don't know. It's without being a Nazi. That's very Nazi. You idiots!
It seems like something a Nazi would say.
I don't want to, stereotype Nazis, but you know what?
If you can get away with it with any group, it's going to be them.
Yeah.
And then they tie it back together because linked up with the Nazis is that MacGyver cat.
Yep. I like it. At first I was like, he sneaks in and he pops open that crate to see all the Nazi ammo. Then the colonel shows up in his Nazi uniform. I'm like, why did you change into your Nazi uniform? And then he goes to explain that they're on their way to capture Indiana Jones anyways. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that makes, like, why did you show up out of the blue dressed as a Nazi? Oh, okay, you're on the way to capture Indy. So, okay, no, that makes more sense.
Dress for the job you want.
Yeah. That's the last time I did that. I got sent to the HR office.
I know. I remember.
Never dressing as a Nazi to work again. But anyways, that's right entirely.
And then we end on something of a cliffhanger, as Indiana Jones is supposed to do. With they're hiding out from the Nazis. The Nazis haven't found them. They're hiding in like a little brush in a little cave, and it seems like there's some sort of beast behind them.
Yes,
growling. We don't know what it is.
You haven't read the next issue yet, but something with yellow eyes, cat eyes behind him. Grrr. Indy, please tell me that was your stomach.
So looking at all that and all the elements, overall thoughts on this one?
It was great. It was a fantastic issue. I am glad that this was my first issue I read. I'm glad I got to appear on your show to talk about it. I thought, they did I say David Michelini and who was it? Terry Gamble.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and who is that? Sam De La Rosa on the inks. Did a fantastic job on this issue. A lot of scenes I could see in an Indiana Jones movie, as we've talked about. It was very much indie worthy, and so it's fantastic seeing it in this book. Like I say, my only real drawback, I guess, is the way that Marion's written.
Fair enough. No, I would agree with that. And like I said, I kind of have this eye out now to see if I can spot things that kind of appear in later movies. And I kind of picked up two things in here. In Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, he will end up in some quicksand. Yes. Which he does in this one as well. And the one thing that really kind of leapt out to me, which is not exactly something that shows up in the movie, is this plot. I may have mentioned it in the opener, but we didn't really talk about it. They're looking for like sort of this missing tribe or artifacts from possibly Atlantis, which we all know post Last Crusade, that was all the buzz. Like, we're going to do one more Indiana Jones movie. It's going to center around Atlanta. Like, that was the rumor for the longest time, that the next one's going to be all about Atlantis. In fact, I think they made a PC game with Indiana Jones going to Atlantis. And everybody was like, Atlantis, they're going to do one more movie. It's going to be Atlantis. And then, as we know, it kind of changed. They decided to do the 50s and alien culture and all that stuff with Crystal Skull. But I thought that was neat that as issue 7, we got the quicksand scene, very similar to what we would see in Crystal Skull, and lots of mentions of Atlantis, which would hang around indie lore for a long time.
Yes, and I do like, they did mention that this is an offshoot of Atlantis, and that's what spurned them to go on this whole adventure. Yeah, because back in the 80s, Atlantis was everywhere.
Everywhere. It's like ninjas. Ninjas were everywhere in the 80s.
Quicksand, the Bermuda Triangle, things that have gone away. You don't hear about quicksand. You don't hear about the Bermuda Triangle anymore. The 80s have lied to me.
I tell you what. Well, speaking of the 80s, and before we get you out of here, we usually stop by and take a look at an ad in the book that we both kind of think is cool. And man, this was an easy pick for the ad out of this one.
Yes, it was.
Aaron, of course, hosts one of the best G.I. Joe podcasts out there on the internets. He does the Real American Headcast. Hey, no problem. The only thing he's not good at is selecting guests. He's not very thorough on who he selects. But
he's not. Aaron's pretty much desperate. He'll take anyone that wants to be on the show. So, if you want to be on the show, here, so come on over.
Come on.
I can't get him to leave.
But in this book, there is a 2-page spread ad for G.I. Joe on the Atari. I believe this is Atari 2600 game.
I believe so.
In each of us, there is both good guy and bad guy. In the G.I. Joe video game, you can be G.I. Joe, fighting for right and justice. Or the super villain Cobra, battling other players with laser blast and venom bombs. You can defend, attack, save, destroy. Play the courageous hero or the unspeakable villain. The choice is yours. G.I. Joe, new from Parker Brothers.
2-page spread. On the left-hand page is Cobra Commander in his hood, which I know you love, and I do too.
Yes, very much so.
It says Cobra's looking for a few bad men, and on the right-hand page, it's Hawk, and he's pointing at you kind of like Uncle Sam. It says G.I. Joe's looking for a few good men. And it's just wonderful 2-page ad for, like I said, G.I. Joe on the Atari 2600. And true to Atari form, where you had to use more of your imagination. 2 giant pictures, good drawings of Cobra Commander and Hawk, and then a tiny little screenshot of what the game will really look like. Aaron, your thoughts on the G.I. Joe Atari 2600 game or this ad in general?
Yeah, the drawing was much better than the actual game. I didn't play the game, but it was Atari 2600. Don't get me wrong. I loved my 2600 growing up. I had the Atari 2600, then I had the Intellivision. Loved them both. But so I loved the Atari, especially at the time. It was, great graphics at the time. But it's not going to compete the artist drawing, especially the hooded Cobra Commander. I don't recall ever seeing this game growing up, so I never did play it. But I would love to give it a go. But it's a great ad. I've seen it several times in recent years. Definitely a great ad. And if I had seen it, because at the time I wasn't reading any comics. The occasional one I'd find like at yard sales or something, but I wasn't a comic book kid. I was into the superheroes. I watched the TVs, the cartoons, and all that. But I wasn't really reading the comics per se, so I missed a lot of these ads when I was growing up. So I didn't And I don't think I ever saw the game in the store, otherwise I would have bought it because it's G.I. Joe. But
Yeah. It's got a pretty cool box, too.
Yeah.
I just pulled it up on eBay. If you were a buyer out there now, you want to go pick it up. The cartridge itself is only like $10.
Oh, very nice.
Buy the game. If you want, like, I'm looking at a high-end, really nice, complete with box instructions, like someone took real good care of it. That guy got about $70 for it. That's the high end. But if you want cart only, you're only looking at about $10. But yeah, I don't think I've ever played this one either. I kind of remember it, like it was, kids talked about, Atari version of G.I. Joe and all that. But yeah, I didn't really play it either. But it's a great looking ad. 2 pages, man.
Yes,
2 full pages.
Yeah, they spent, it was, it wasn't actual Marvel. So I'm sure they paid a pretty penny for 2 full page ads. So
full pages. But G.I. Joe was really on the rise here.
That's what we talked about on the show. Yeah, this was right before, they started, had the digest and the versus Transformers and the yearbook, or not the yearbook, Order of Battle and all these other, a little later they come out and they'd start redoing the reprints of the actual issues, hotels of G.I. Joe. That's what it was.
Right. Yeah.
This is the beginning of that old era of G.I. Joe.
Yeah, we're firmly in 1983, so G.I. Joe is just sort of lifting off. And we mentioned on recording your show earlier today, I don't know when these 2 episodes are going to come out relative to each other, but we mentioned how there's this time where Indiana Jones is popular and Star Wars is popular, and now G.I. Joe and Transformers are sort of rising into that. So there's this magical time in our youth where like G.I. Joe, Star Wars, Transformers, Indiana Jones are all popular, all have comics on the stands. What a great time to be.
And as I talk about my Starman Adventure Hour, I mean, I go through and look at the comics that are on the stand that month. In the late 80s, early 90s, everything in existence had a comic book. All these video games have comic books. New Kids on the Block had like 2 or 3 different comics.
It's just the way.
Nintendo, Mario,
you're absolutely right.
It seemed like everything had a comic book. Yeah, everything had a comic book, it seemed. So
a wonderful time to be alive.
But yeah, this was the start of a great era for G.I. Joe.
It certainly was. And what a cool ad. I guess that brings us to about the end of our chat for today around Indiana Jones, Further Adventures of Indiana Jones number 7.
Yes.
I appreciate you coming down to the Temple of Longbox. Why don't you tell folks, you were just telling them a little bit about stuff you offer. Go ahead and rattle off what they need to know about you, my friend.
My shows, you can listen to them at headcast.headspeaks.com. I've got all my shows on there. I've got 2 in a number right here, but yeah, my main ones is G.I. Joe, a Real American Headcast, and Bravo Team, where I look at anything G.I. Joe related. Right now we're covering on the main show, we're looking at the comic book and also the cartoon from the 80s. And then on Bravo Team right now, we're looking at the special missions. Originally that was supposed to be every other month, but I got off, so we're doing it monthly now. So, and I've had to put a hold on the Order of Battle, which we started, but great times. I've also got Head Speaks, where I look at anything geek related. Right now I'm kind of looking at stuff from the 80s, because again, that's kind of my time period is the 80s, because it's a great time. And I cover different comics. Like I said, I just finished up the Power of the Atom series. Previously, I talked about Armageddon 2001, trying to decide what to go into next. But yeah, I look at anything geek related, and usually with an 80s perspective, because again, that's when I grew up. That's when I was a teenager. And again, that was, the great music, the great movies, everything was in, the 80s, in my not so humble opinion. But
I concur wholeheartedly.
But yeah, I'm also facebook.com/group/headcast or facebook.com/group/GI Joe for my shows. Go ahead and check that out. And thank you very much for asking me to be on your show, Jared. It's always a pleasure. And again, I can come on and not have to do any prep, not have to read anything.
Exactly.
Not to do editing, to show up and make some pithy comments and.
Well, I appreciate you being here. You're always welcome at the Temple of Longbox. And I'm sure I'll catch you on another recording somewhere.
Oh, very soon, I'm sure.
You can find me at Yard Sale Artist on X, Facebook, and Instagram. It's all at Yard Sale Artist. You can check out my artwares at www.theyardsaleartist.com. And of course, we'd love for you to check out the Longbox Crusade in all its locations. We are at Longbox Crusade on X, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. You name it, you can probably find us out there at Longbox Crusade. Of course, you can call and leave a voicemail, 707-532-5269, 707-532-LBOX. We'd love to hear from you. And this is one of our shorter shows, so I will just say thank you to all the Patreon members out there. Our Crusaders Club members are the best, and they keep this stuff going. Thank you so much. I look forward to reading your names on a longer episode in the near future. With that, thanks for joining us again down here in the Temple of Longbox, and we will see you soon.
We named the dog Indiana.
The dog? You are named after the dog?
Got a lot of fond memories of that dog. What did you find, Junior?
Junior? Dad? Jeez, what does it always mean? It's Junior.
What's his name? Henry Jones Jr.
Like Indiana. May we go home now, please?